The airplane cabin buzzed with the usual pre-flight activity as passengers settled into their seats. Flight attendant Jessica Martinez adjusted her uniform and checked her appearance in the small mirror near the galley. She had been working for Skyline Airways for 8 years, and she took pride in maintaining the airline's reputation for excellent service. Jessica noticed a well-dressed black woman walking down the aisle toward the business class section. The woman wore an elegant navy blue suit and carried herself with quiet confidence. Her name was Dr. Amara Johnson, though Jessica didn't know this yet. What Jessica saw was someone she assumed didn't belong in the expensive seats. Dr. Johnson found her seat in row 3 and began placing her laptop bag in the overhead compartment. She moved with the practiced ease of someone who traveled frequently for business. As the CEO and owner of Johnson Global Industries, a multinational technology company worth over $2 billion, she spent countless hours in airplanes traveling between her offices in New York, London, and Tokyo. Jessica approached with a forced smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Excuse me, miss," she said in a tone that was polite but carried an undertone of suspicion. "Could I see your boarding pass? I think there might be some confusion about your seating." Dr. Johnson looked up calmly, her dark eyes meeting Jessica's gaze. She had encountered this type of situation before, unfortunately. "Of course," she replied smoothly, reaching into her purse to retrieve the boarding pass. Her voice carried a slight accent from her childhood in Ghana, though she had lived in the United States for over 20 years. Jessica examined the boarding pass with exaggerated care, turning it over as if looking for signs of forgery. The seat assignment clearly showed 3A business class, but Jessica seemed reluctant to accept what was plainly written. "Are you sure this is your ticket?" she asked. "Business class tickets are quite expensive. Maybe you meant to book economy?" Other passengers in nearby seats began to notice the interaction. Some shifted uncomfortably in their chairs, while others openly stared. Dr. Johnson maintained her composure, though she felt the familiar tightness in her chest that came with these encounters. "I'm quite certain this is my seat," she said firmly, but without raising her voice. The pilot, Captain Williams, was doing his final checks when he noticed the commotion in the business class section. He had been flying for Skyline Airways for 15 years and had seen Jessica handle difficult situations before. Usually she was professional and courteous. Today seemed different. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to move to your correct seat," Jessica continued, her voice growing louder. "We can't have passengers sitting in seats they didn't pay for. It's airline policy." Dr. Johnson felt her patience beginning to wear thin. She had important meetings in Chicago the next morning with potential investors for her company's new artificial intelligence division. The last thing she needed was this unnecessary drama. "I have paid for this seat," she said, her voice remaining steady despite her growing frustration. "My assistant booked this ticket 3 weeks ago." A businessman in the seat across the aisle leaned forward. "Just show her another form of ID," he suggested helpfully. "Maybe that will clear things up." Dr. Johnson appreciated the man's attempt to help, but she knew this wasn't really about identification. She reached into her wallet and pulled out her driver's license, credit card, and business card. "Here's my identification," she said, handing the items to Jessica. Jessica barely glanced at the driver's license before focusing on the credit card. "This could be anyone's card," she said dismissively. She picked up the business card and read it aloud with obvious skepticism. "Dr. Amara Johnson, Chief Executive Officer, Johnson Global Industries." She laughed, but it wasn't a pleasant sound. "Right, and I'm the Queen of England." The tension in the cabin was becoming palpable. Several passengers had pulled out their phones, though no one was recording yet. Flight attendant Marcus Thompson, Jessica's colleague, noticed the situation from the back of the plane and began walking forward to assist. "Look," Dr. Johnson said, her voice still controlled but with an edge of steel, "I don't know what your problem is, but I have every right to sit in the seat I purchased. I've shown you my boarding pass and my identification. What more do you want?" Jessica's face flushed red with anger. She felt challenged in front of the other passengers, and her professional composure began to crack. "What I want is for you to stop lying and go to your real seat before I have to call security," she snapped. The businessman across the aisle looked uncomfortable. "Ma'am," he said to Jessica, "maybe you should check with your supervisor. The lady has shown you her ticket and ID." "I don't need anyone telling me how to do my job," Jessica replied sharply, not taking her eyes off Dr. Johnson. "Especially not someone trying to scam their way into business class." Dr. Johnson stood up slowly, her full height making her an imposing figure despite the cramped airplane cabin. She had built her company from nothing, starting with a small software development firm in her garage 12 years ago. She had faced down hostile board meetings, aggressive competitors, and skeptical investors. She was not about to be intimidated by an airline employee with an attitude problem. "I think you need to step back and reconsider your approach," Dr. Johnson said quietly, but her voice carried unmistakable authority. "You're making assumptions that are both unprofessional and inappropriate." Jessica felt a surge of anger at what she perceived as arrogance. In her mind, she was just doing her job, protecting the airline from someone trying to take advantage. She didn't see her own bias, didn't recognize how her preconceptions were driving her behavior. Marcus finally reached the front of the plane. "Everything okay here?" he asked, looking between Jessica and Dr. Johnson with concern. "This woman is trying to sit in business class with a fake ticket," Jessica said immediately. "I need help getting her to move to her real seat." Marcus looked at the boarding pass in Jessica's hand, then at Dr. Johnson's calm but clearly frustrated expression. Something felt wrong about the situation. "May I see the boarding pass?" he asked politely. Jessica handed it over reluctantly. Marcus examined it carefully, noting the official airline printing, the correct flight number, and the clear seat assignment. Everything looked legitimate to him. "This appears to be a valid business class ticket," Marcus said carefully. "Perhaps we should—" "Of course you'd take her side," Jessica interrupted, her professionalism completely abandoning her now. "You people always stick together." The words hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Several passengers gasped audibly. The businessman across the aisle shook his head in disgust. Even Marcus looked shocked at his colleague's blatant racism. Dr. Johnson felt something cold settle in her stomach. She had hoped this was just a misunderstanding, an overzealous employee making a mistake. Now she realized the true nature of what was happening. "Excuse me?" she said, her voice dangerously quiet. Jessica seemed to realize she had crossed a line, but instead of backing down, she doubled down on her position. "I'm just saying that some people will do anything to get something for free," she said, trying to walk back her previous comment while still maintaining her stance. "And what exactly do you mean by you people?" Dr. Johnson asked, stepping closer to Jessica. Her voice remained controlled, but there was fire in her eyes. The cabin had gone completely silent except for the hum of the plane's engines. Even the other flight attendants had stopped their preparations to watch the unfolding drama. Captain Williams, hearing the commotion, decided to leave the cockpit to see what was happening. Jessica realized she was losing control of the situation, but her pride wouldn't let her admit she was wrong. "Look, I don't have time for this," she said. "Either move to your correct seat or get off the plane." Dr. Johnson had reached her limit. She had tried to remain calm, tried to handle the situation diplomatically. But Jessica's attitude, her assumptions, and now her outright prejudice had pushed her too far. "I am not moving," Dr. Johnson said firmly. "This is my seat, which I paid for, and I have every right to sit here. Your behavior is completely unacceptable and discriminatory." Jessica felt cornered and embarrassed in front of all the watching passengers. Her face was bright red with anger and humiliation. Without thinking clearly, she raised her hand and slapped Dr. Johnson hard across the face. The sound of the slap echoed through the cabin like a gunshot. Complete silence followed as everyone processed what had just happened. Dr. Johnson stood perfectly still, one hand moving slowly to touch her stinging cheek, her eyes never leaving Jessica's face. Marcus stepped forward immediately. "Jessica, what have you done?" he whispered in horror. Captain Williams had arrived just in time to witness the assault. His face went pale as he realized the magnitude of what had just occurred. "Flight Attendant Martinez, step away immediately," he commanded in a voice that brooked no argument. Jessica seemed to come back to her senses, finally realizing what she had done. She looked at her hand as if it belonged to someone else, then at the faces of the passengers staring at her in shock and disgust. The businessman across the aisle was already on his phone, likely calling someone in authority. Dr. Johnson remained standing calmly, though the red mark on her cheek was clearly visible. She reached into her purse and pulled out her phone, scrolling through her contacts with deliberate precision. "What are you doing?" Jessica asked, her voice now small and frightened. Dr. Johnson didn't answer immediately. Instead, she found the number she was looking for and pressed call. After a moment, someone answered on the other end. "Richard, it's Amara," she said into the phone, her voice steady despite what had just happened. "I need you to get me the direct number for the CEO of Skyline Airways. Yes, right now. I don't care what time it is." Jessica felt a chill run down her spine. Something about the way Dr. Johnson spoke. The confidence in her voice, the way she seemed to have important people on speed dial, made her begin to question her assumptions for the first time. Captain Williams approached Dr. Johnson cautiously. "Ma'am, I am so sorry about what just happened. This behavior is completely unacceptable and does not represent our airline's values. We will be taking immediate action." Dr. Johnson nodded acknowledgement but continued her phone call. "Yes, I'll hold for the number." She looked directly at Jessica while she waited. "I think it's time we had a conversation about exactly who owns what around here." Jessica's face had gone from red to pale white. A terrible suspicion was beginning to form in her mind, but she couldn't quite believe it was possible. She watched as Dr. Johnson waited patiently for her call to be transferred, seeming completely at ease despite having just been assaulted. The other passengers were beginning to whisper among themselves, many of them pulling out their phones to record what was clearly going to be an interesting conclusion to this confrontation. Marcus stood nearby, ready to intervene if Jessica tried anything else, but she seemed frozen in place. Dr. Johnson's phone connected, and she began speaking to someone new. "Hello, this is Dr. Amara Johnson. I need to speak with your CEO immediately about an incident involving one of your employees." "Yes, I'll hold." As she waited, she looked around at the faces of the passengers, most of whom were watching her with a mixture of sympathy and curiosity. Then her gaze returned to Jessica, who was standing perfectly still, as if afraid to move. "The CEO will speak with me now," Dr. Johnson said into her phone. "Thank you for connecting me so quickly." Dr. Johnson held her phone to her ear as the call connected. Jessica watched in growing horror, finally beginning to understand that this might not be the simple case of mistaken identity she had assumed. The confidence in Dr. Johnson's voice, the way she spoke to people on the phone, the quality of her clothes and accessories that Jessica had dismissed as fake, it was all starting to make terrible sense. "Hello, Michael," Dr. Johnson said into her phone, her voice warm but businesslike. "Yes, it's Amara. I'm sorry to call you so late, but I'm having a serious problem with one of your employees on Flight 447 to Chicago." Jessica's legs felt weak. "Michael? As in Michael Stevens, the CEO of Skyline Airways? The man whose picture hung in the employee break room at every Skyline facility?" Jessica had seen him at company events, though she had never spoken to him personally. He was a tall, distinguished man in his 60s who had built Skyline Airways into one of the most successful airlines in the country. Captain Williams moved closer, his face grave with concern. He had been with the airline long enough to recognize when something very serious was happening. The way Dr. Johnson spoke, the familiarity in her voice when she said the CEO's name, suggested a level of connection that made Jessica's actions even more catastrophic than they already appeared. "Yes, I understand you know who I am," Dr. Johnson continued. "Your employee, Jessica Martinez, has just physically assaulted me after making several racist comments and refusing to accept that I had a valid business class ticket." The words hit Jessica like physical blows. She tried to speak, to defend herself, but no words came out. Her mouth opened and closed silently as she watched her entire career crumble before her eyes. Dr. Johnson listened to the voice on the other end of the phone for a moment, then looked directly at Jessica. "She's standing right here, actually. Would you like to speak with her?" Jessica shook her head frantically, but Dr. Johnson was already extending the phone toward her. "Michael Stevens would like a word with you," she said calmly. With trembling hands, Jessica took the phone. "Hey, hello?" she managed to whisper. The voice that came through the phone was cold and professional. "Ms. Martinez, this is Michael Stevens. I've just been informed that you have physically assaulted one of our most valued customers after subjecting her to racial discrimination. Is this true?" Jessica's mind raced, trying to find some way to explain her actions that wouldn't sound as terrible as the truth. "Sir, I was just trying to make sure that the passenger was in the right seat. I thought maybe there was some confusion." "Did you or did you not slap Dr. Johnson?" Stevens asked, cutting through her stammering explanation. The cabin remained completely silent, with every passenger straining to hear the conversation. Marcus stood nearby, his face a mixture of sympathy and horror as he watched his colleague's career implode in real time. She was being difficult and Jessica couldn't finish the sentence. The truth was indefensible, and she knew it. "Ms. Martinez, you are terminated effective immediately," Stevens said, his voice like ice. "You will be escorted off this aircraft by security when it lands, and you will never work for Skyline Airways or any of its partner airlines again. Your actions tonight are grounds not only for dismissal, but for criminal assault charges." Jessica felt the phone slip from her nerveless fingers. Dr. Johnson caught it smoothly before it could hit the floor. "Michael, it's me again," Dr. Johnson said into the phone. "I appreciate your quick response, but I think there are some things we need to discuss beyond just this individual incident." Jessica sank into an empty seat, her mind reeling. Terminated. 8 years with the airline gone in an instant. And criminal charges? She could go to jail for what she had done, all because she had made assumptions about someone based on the color of their skin. "Yes, I think a full investigation into your hiring and training practices would be appropriate," Dr. Johnson continued. "This level of bias doesn't develop overnight. There may be systemic issues that need to be addressed." Captain Williams approached Jessica, his expression sympathetic but firm. "I need you to go to the back of the plane and remain there for the duration of the flight," he said quietly. "Marcus will escort you." Jessica stood up shakily, finally understanding the full magnitude of her mistake. As Marcus guided her toward the rear of the aircraft, she could hear the other passengers whispering among themselves. Several were clearly recording the incident on their phones, and she realized that by tomorrow, this would probably be all over social media. Dr. Johnson ended her phone call and calmly returned to her seat. The businessman across the aisle leaned over with obvious curiosity and concern. "Are you all right?" he asked. That was completely unacceptable behavior from that flight attendant. Dr. Johnson touched her cheek gingerly. The slap had left a red mark, but the sting was already fading. "I'm fine, thank you. Unfortunately, this isn't the first time something like this has happened to me." "If you don't mind me asking," the businessman said carefully, "it sounded like you know the CEO of the airline personally." A small smile played at the corners of Dr. Johnson's mouth. Michael Stevens and I have done business together for several years. My company has a corporate account with Skyline Airways. What she didn't mention was the full extent of her relationship with the airline. 3 years ago, when Skyline Airways was facing serious financial difficulties due to increased competition and rising fuel costs, Dr. Johnson's investment firm had provided a crucial loan that kept the airline from bankruptcy. In return, she had received a significant stake in the company, enough to make her the single largest shareholder outside of the founding family. The flight attendant who had remained at the front of the cabin approached hesitantly. Her name tag read Sarah, and she looked deeply embarrassed by her colleague's behavior. "Dr. Johnson, I am so terribly sorry about what happened," Sarah said. "Is there anything I can do to make you more comfortable for the rest of the flight?" "Thank you, Sarah. I appreciate your professionalism," Dr. Johnson replied. "Perhaps you could bring me some ice for my cheek." "Of course, right away," Sarah said, hurrying toward the galley. As the plane finally began to taxi toward the runway, Dr. Johnson reflected on the incident. She had built her company by never backing down from a challenge, by refusing to let other people's limitations become her own. Tonight had been no different, except that Jessica Martinez had pushed things to a level that was completely unacceptable. Dr. Johnson pulled out her laptop and began reviewing her presentation for the next day's investor meeting. Her company's new artificial intelligence division was developing technology that could revolutionize how airlines manage their operations, from scheduling to customer service. The irony was not lost on her that she was about to present this technology to potential investors while sitting on an airline whose employee had just demonstrated exactly the kind of human bias that her AI systems were designed to eliminate. Meanwhile, in the back of the plane, Jessica sat in stunned silence. Marcus had given her a bottle of water and left her alone with her thoughts. She kept replaying the incident in her mind, trying to understand how she had let her prejudices cloud her judgment so completely. She thought about Dr. Johnson's calm demeanor throughout the confrontation. The way she had maintained her dignity even when being wrongly accused and then physically assaulted. Jessica realized that Dr. Johnson had shown more class and professionalism in those few minutes than Jessica had managed in her entire 8-year career. The plane reached cruising altitude, and the captain turned off the seatbelt sign. Sarah returned with ice wrapped in a cloth napkin for Dr. Johnson's cheek, along with a handwritten note. "This is from Captain Williams," Sarah explained as she handed over the note. Dr. Johnson opened it and read, "Dr. Johnson, please accept my sincerest apologies for tonight's incident. I have been in contact with our corporate headquarters, and we will be conducting a full investigation into this matter. Your safety and comfort are our highest priorities, and we failed you tonight. Captain Williams." Dr. Johnson folded the note thoughtfully. She appreciated the captain's response, but she knew that this incident was symptomatic of larger problems within the airline industry. Despite all the diversity training and anti-discrimination policies, bias still existed at every level. Her phone buzzed with a text message from her assistant, Richard. "Saw the news alerts about the airline incident. Are you okay? Do you need me to contact our legal team?" Dr. Johnson typed back, "I'm fine. Let's discuss legal options tomorrow. Also, please schedule a meeting with our investment committee. We need to talk about our Skyline Airways holdings." She put her phone away and returned to her laptop. On the screen was a financial analysis of various airline stocks, including Skyline Airways. As the company's largest individual shareholder, she had significant influence over its policies and practices. Tonight's incident had given her a new perspective on how that influence might be used. The businessman across the aisle had been working on his own laptop, but he kept glancing over with obvious curiosity. Finally, he introduced himself. "I'm David Chen," he said, extending his hand. "I run a small consulting firm in Chicago. I have to say, the way you handled that situation was remarkable." Most people would have lost their temper completely. Dr. Johnson shook his hand. Amara Johnson. And thank you, though I wish it hadn't been necessary at all. Johnson, David repeated thoughtfully. Wait, are you the Johnson from Johnson Global Industries? The tech company? Dr. Johnson nodded. Guilty as charged. David's eyes widened. I've been following your company's work in artificial intelligence. The applications for business optimization are incredible. I actually have some of your software running in my own office. I'm glad it's working well for you, Dr. Johnson said. We're always looking for feedback from our users. As they talked, Dr. Johnson found herself thinking about the broader implications of the night's events. Jessica's behavior wasn't just a personal failing. It was a symptom of systemic problems that affected not just airlines, but businesses across every industry. Her company's AI technology could help eliminate some forms of bias in business processes, but it couldn't change people's hearts and minds. That would require a different kind of approach, one that combined technology with education, policy changes with personal accountability. As one of the few black women to build a billion-dollar company from scratch, Dr. Johnson knew she had both the platform and the responsibility to push for real change. The flight continued smoothly toward Chicago, but Dr. Johnson knew that the real turbulence was just beginning. Tomorrow, she would be meeting with her investment committee to discuss Skyline Airways. Tonight's incident had just given her a very clear agenda for that conversation. In the back of the plane, Jessica stared out the window at the lights below, wondering how she would explain to her family that she had lost her job and possibly her freedom, because she couldn't see past the color of someone's skin. It was a mistake that would haunt her for years to come, and one that would have consequences far beyond anything she could imagine. The plane touched down at Chicago O'Hare International Airport at 11:47 p.m., nearly an hour behind schedule due to air traffic delays. As passengers began gathering their belongings, Dr. Johnson remained seated, finishing an email to her legal team about the evening's incident. She had decided to pursue both criminal and civil charges against Jessica Martinez, not out of vindictiveness, but to send a clear message that such behavior would have serious consequences. Captain Williams approached her seat as the other passengers filed off the plane. Dr. Johnson, I wanted to personally apologize again for tonight's incident. Airport security is waiting to escort Ms. Martinez off the aircraft, and they'll need to speak with you as well to file an incident report. Dr. Johnson nodded, closing her laptop. I appreciate your professionalism throughout this situation, Captain Williams. You handled a difficult situation with exactly the kind of leadership your passengers deserve. As they spoke, Jessica was being led off the plane in handcuffs. The airport police had been waiting, having been briefed on the assault that had taken place during the flight. Jessica's face was streaked with tears as she realized that her impulsive action had not just cost her job, but would likely result in criminal charges and a permanent criminal record. Dr. Johnson gathered her belongings and walked off the plane with quiet dignity. In the jetway, several passengers who had witnessed the incident approached her with words of support and encouragement. Many had recorded the confrontation on their phones, and by the time Dr. Johnson reached the terminal, videos of the incident were already beginning to circulate on social media. The airport police took Dr. Johnson's statement in a private office near the security checkpoint. She recounted the events calmly and factually, providing a detailed account of Jessica's discriminatory behavior and the physical assault. The officers informed her that Jessica would be charged with assault and battery, and that the FBI would likely investigate the incident as a potential hate crime due to the racial elements involved. After completing her statement, Dr. Johnson checked into the airport hotel for a few hours of sleep before her morning meetings. However, sleep proved elusive as her phone continued to buzz with calls and messages from reporters who had learned about the incident from the social media videos. By 6 a.m., Skyline Airways and ASH flight attendant assault were trending on multiple social media platforms. The videos showed Jessica's discriminatory behavior, and the moment she slapped Dr. Johnson, though they didn't capture the full context of who Dr. Johnson really was. That revelation would come later, and it would shake the airline industry to its core. Dr. Johnson's morning began with a conference call with her legal team and public relations advisors. The incident had taken on a life of its own, with major news outlets picking up the story and civil rights organizations calling for boycotts of Skyline Airways. The public response has been overwhelming, her PR director Maria Santos reported over the phone. We're getting interview requests from every major network, and your story is the top trending topic on social media. How do you want to handle this? Dr. Johnson sipped her coffee thoughtfully. I want to use this as an opportunity to address the larger issues of discrimination in the service industry. This isn't just about one ignorant flight attendant. It's about systemic problems that affect millions of people every day. At 9 a.m., Dr. Johnson arrived at her scheduled investor meeting at the Palmer House Hotel in downtown Chicago. The potential investors were executives from several major pension funds and private equity firms who were considering backing her company's expansion into the European market. However, the morning's news had completely changed the dynamic of the meeting. Dr. Johnson, said Margaret Hayes, the lead investor, we've all seen the news about last night's incident. First, let me say that what happened to you was completely unacceptable, but I have to ask, how do you think this publicity will affect your business relationships? Dr. Johnson smiled slightly. Actually, I think it's going to strengthen them. My company's AI technology is designed to eliminate exactly the kind of human bias that was on display last night. This incident has inadvertently provided the perfect demonstration of why our technology is necessary. The presentation that followed was Dr. Johnson's most persuasive yet. She explained how her company's AI systems could help airlines and other service companies identify and eliminate discriminatory practices in their operations. The technology could analyze customer service interactions, flag potentially biased behavior, and provide real-time training recommendations to employees. By the end of the meeting, the investors had committed to a $500 million funding round, twice what Dr. Johnson had originally requested. The incident on the plane had transformed her from just another tech entrepreneur into a powerful symbol of resilience and success in the face of discrimination. Meanwhile, at Skyline Airways headquarters in Atlanta, CEO Michael Stevens was dealing with the worst public relations crisis in the company's history. The phones had been ringing non-stop since the story broke, with angry customers demanding explanations and threatening to cancel their bookings. Stevens called an emergency board meeting for that afternoon. As he prepared for the meeting, his assistant brought him a folder of information about Dr. Johnson that his research team had compiled overnight. "Sir, you need to see this," his assistant said, placing the folder on his desk. "Dr. Johnson isn't just a customer. She's our largest individual shareholder outside of the founding family." Stevens opened the folder and felt his blood run cold. The financial documents showed that Dr. Johnson's investment firm owned 31% of Skyline Airways stock, making her effectively the most powerful person in the room at any board meeting. The loan her company had provided 3 years ago had not just saved the airline, it had given her significant control over its future. The board meeting that afternoon was tense and uncomfortable. Stevens had to explain to the other board members how one of their employees had physically assaulted their largest shareholder, creating a crisis that threatened the entire company's reputation and financial stability. "The stock price has dropped 12% since the story broke this morning," reported CFO Patricia Wong. "We're getting cancellation requests from corporate clients, and several of our partnerships are under review. This is a disaster." Board member Robert Harrison, representing the airline's founding family, was particularly upset. "How did this happen, Michael? We've spent decades building this company's reputation, and one employee has nearly destroyed it overnight." Stevens pulled up the social media feeds on the conference room screen. The videos of Jessica slapping Dr. Johnson had been viewed millions of times, and the comments were overwhelmingly critical of the airline. Celebrities, politicians, and business leaders were all weighing in, condemning the incident and calling for accountability. "We need to do more than just fire the employee," Stevens said. "Dr. Johnson has every right to pursue legal action against us as a company, and given her stake in our ownership, she could potentially force major changes in our operations." As if summoned by their conversation, Stevens's phone rang. It was Dr. Johnson. "Michael, I hope you don't mind me calling directly, but I think we need to have a conversation about the future of Skyline Airways," she said without preamble. Stevens put the call on speaker so the board could hear. "Of course, Amara. The entire board is here, actually. We were just discussing the situation." "Good, that saves time," Dr. Johnson replied. "I want to make something very clear. Last night's incident wasn't just an isolated case of one employee's bad judgment. It's symptomatic of deeper problems in your corporate culture and training programs." The board members exchanged worried glances. They all knew that Dr. Johnson's shareholding gave her enormous influence over the company's direction. "I'm prepared to work with you to address these issues," Dr. Johnson continued. "But it's going to require comprehensive changes. New training programs, revised hiring practices, and a complete overhaul of your customer service protocols. I want Skyline Airways to become the industry leader in anti-discrimination practices." Stevens cleared his throat nervously. "What exactly are you proposing?" "I'm proposing that we implement my company's AI-based bias detection system across your entire operation. Every customer service interaction, every hiring decision, every promotion review, all of it gets analyzed by AI systems designed to identify and eliminate discriminatory practices." The proposal was ambitious and would require significant investment, but the board realized they had little choice. Dr. Johnson's combination of moral authority and financial power made her demands nearly impossible to refuse. Board member Harrison spoke up. "Dr. Johnson, what about the immediate situation? The media attention, the public backlash, how do we handle that?" "I'm holding a press conference tomorrow morning," Dr. Johnson replied. "I'm going to announce that despite last night's incident, I'm committed to working with Skyline Airways to create meaningful change, but that commitment is contingent on your willingness to implement the changes I've outlined." After the call ended, the board voted unanimously to accept Dr. Johnson's proposal. They would implement her AI technology, revise their training programs, and establish her as the chairman of a new diversity and inclusion committee with sweeping authority to make changes. The next morning, Dr. Johnson stood before a packed press conference at the Palmer House Hotel. Cameras flashed as she approached the podium, and reporters shouted questions about the airline incident and her plans for the future. "Yesterday evening, I was subjected to racial discrimination and physical assault by a Skyline Airways employee," she began, her voice clear and strong. "This incident was unacceptable, but it also represents an opportunity to address systemic problems that exist throughout the service industry." She went on to announce her expanded partnership with Skyline Airways, explaining how they would work together to implement cutting-edge technology designed to eliminate bias and discrimination. The announcement sent shockwaves through the airline industry, as other companies realized they would need to take similar steps to remain competitive. The press conference was carried live on major news networks, and the response was overwhelmingly positive. Civil rights leaders praised Dr. Johnson for using her position to create meaningful change rather than simply seeking revenge. Business analysts noted that the partnership would likely make Skyline Airways more attractive to diverse customers and could boost its long-term profitability. Within a week, 3 other major airlines had reached out to Dr. Johnson's company about implementing similar bias detection systems. The incident that had started with Jessica Martinez's prejudice and ignorance had inadvertently sparked a revolution in how the airline industry approached diversity and inclusion. A month later, Jessica Martinez sat in her small apartment, watching a news report about Dr. Johnson's latest business success. The charges against Jessica had been reduced to misdemeanor assault after she agreed to undergo sensitivity training and perform community service, but the damage to her reputation was permanent. No airline would hire her, and she had been forced to take a job at a local restaurant while she tried to figure out her next steps. As she watched Dr. Johnson being interviewed on television about her company's expansion into Europe, Jessica finally understood the full magnitude of her mistake. She had assaulted not just an innocent passenger, but one of the most powerful business leaders in the country. Her prejudice had blinded her to Dr. Johnson's obvious intelligence, success, and dignity. Jessica picked up a pen and began writing a letter, not seeking forgiveness or trying to excuse her behavior, but simply acknowledging the harm she had caused and expressing her commitment to becoming a better person. It was a small step, but it was a beginning. Dr. Johnson never responded to the letter, but she didn't need to. The changes she had implemented at Skyline Airways and across the industry were her response. Thousands of employees were now receiving better training. Millions of passengers were being treated with greater respect, and the entire transportation industry was becoming more fair and inclusive. The slap that was meant to put Dr. Johnson in her place had instead elevated her to an even more powerful position as a leader in the fight against discrimination. Sometimes the most profound changes come from the most unexpected places. Even from 30,000 feet above the ground, in the cramped confines of an airplane cabin, where prejudice met its match in quiet dignity and unstoppable determination.